agreed to this and went to the elephant stall. The Queen Mother proclaimed an elephant festival and said to Pabhavati, "Come, we will go and see your lord's elephants." Taking her there, she pointed out this and that elephant by name. Then, as Pabhavati was walking behind his mother, the king struck her in the back with a lump of elephant dung. She was enraged and said, "I will get the king to cut your hand off," and by her words she annoyed the Queen Mother, who appeased her by rubbing her back. A second time the king was anxious to see her, and, disguised as a groom in the horse stable, just as before, he struck her with a piece of horse dirt, and then too when she was angry her mother-in-law appeased her. Again, one day Pabhavati told her mother-in-law she longed to see the great being. And when her request was refused by her mother, who said, "No, let not this be your pleasure," she pleaded her again and again, so at last she said, "Well, tomorrow my son will be making a procession through the city. You can open your window and see him." And after so saying, on the next day she had the city decorated, and ordered Prince Jayampati, clad in a royal robe and mounted on an elephant, to make a triumphal procession through the city. Standing at the window with Pabhavati, she said, "See the glory of your lord." She said, "I have got a husband not unworthy of me," and she was highly elated. But that very day the great being, disguised as an elephant keeper, was seated behind Jayampati, and gazing at Pabhavati as much as he would. In the joy of his heart he enjoyed himself by gesticulating with his hands. When the elephant had passed them, the Queen Mother asked her if she had seen her husband. "Yes, lady, but seated behind him was an elephant keeper, a very ill-conducted fellow, who gesticulated at me with his hands. Why do they let such an ugly, ill-omened creature sit behind the king? It is desirable, my dear, to have a guard sit behind the king. This elephant keeper," she thought, "is a bold fellow, and has no proper respect for the king. Can it be that he is King Kusa? No doubt he is hideous, and that is why they do not let me see him." So she whispered to her humpbacked nurse, "Go, my dear, at once and make out whether it was the king who sat in front or behind. How am I to find this out? If he be the king, he will be the first to descend from the elephant. You are to know by this token." She went and stood at a distance and saw the great being descend first, and afterwards Prince Jayampati. The great being looking about him, first on one side and then on the other, seeing the humpbacked old woman, knew at once why she must have come, and, sending for her, straitly charged her not to reveal his secret, and let her go. She came and told her mistress, the one that sat in front was the first to descend, and Pabhavati believed her. Once more the king longed to see her and begged his mother to arrange it. She could not refuse him and said, "Well then, disguise yourself and go to the garden." He went and hid himself up to his neck in the lotus pool, standing in the water with his head shaded by a lotus leaf and his face covered by its flower. And his mother brought Pabhavati in the evening to the garden, and saying, "Look at these trees, or look at these birds or deer," thus tempted her until she came to the bank of the lotus pond. When she saw the pond covered with 5 kinds of lotus, she longed to bathe and went down to the water's edge with her girls. While enjoying herself she saw that lotus and stretched on her hand, eager to pluck it. Then the king, putting aside the lotus leaf, took her by the hand, saying, "I am King Kusa." On seeing his face she cried, "A goblin is catching hold of me," and then and there swooned away. So the king let go her hand. On recovering consciousness she thought, "King Kusa, they say, caught me by the hand. And he it was that hit me in the elephant stall with a piece of elephant dirt, and in the horse stable with a piece of horse dirt, and he it was that sat behind on the elephant and made game of me. What have I to do with such an ugly, hideous husband? If I live, I will have another husband. So she summoned the counselors who had escorted her here and said, Make ready my chariot. This very day I will be off. They told this to the king, and he thought, If she cannot get away, her heart will break. Let her go. By my own power I will bring her back again. So he allowed her to depart, and she returned straight to her father's city. And the great being passed from the park into the city and climbed up to his splendid palace. Truly it was in consequence of an aspiration in a previous existence that she disapproved of the bodhisattva, and it was owing to a former act of his that he was so ugly. Of old, they say, in a suburb of Benares, in the upper and lower street, one family had 2 sons and another had 1 daughter. Of the 2 sons the bodhisattva was the younger, and the girl was wedded to the elder son, but the younger, being unmarried, continued to live with his brother. Now one day in this house they baked some very elegant cakes, and the bodhisattva was away in the forest. So putting aside a cake for him, they distributed and ate the rest. At that moment a Pacceka Buddha came to the door for alms. The bodhisattva's sister-in-law thought she would bake another cake for young master and took and gave his cake to the Pacceka Buddha, and at that very instant he returned from the forest. So she said, My lord, do not be angry, but I have given your portion to the Pacceka Buddha. He said, After eating your own portion you give mine away, and you will make me another cake for sure. And he was angry and went and took the cake from the beggar's bowl. She went to her mother's house and took some fresh melted ghee, in color like the champak flower, and filled the bowl with it, and it sent on a blaze of light. On seeing this she put up a prayer. Holy Sir, wherever I am born, may my body give on a light, and may I be very lovely, and never again may I have to dwell in the same place with this lewd fellow. Thus as the result of this prayer of old she would have none of him. And the bodhisattva, in dropping the cake again into the bowl, put up a prayer. Holy Sir, though she should live 100 leagues away, may I have the power to carry her off as my bride. In that he was angry and took the cake. As the result of this act of old he was born so ugly. Kusa was so overwhelmed with sorrow when Pabhavati left him that the other women, though ministering to him with all kinds of service, had not the heart to look him in the face, and all his palace, deprived of Pabhavati, seemed as it were desolate. Then he thought, By this time she will have reached the city Sagala, and at break of day he looked for his mother and said, Dear mother, I will go and fetch Pabhavati. You are to rule my kingdom, and he uttered the first stanza. This realm with joy and bliss untold, ornamental dresses of state and wealth of gold. This realm, I say, rule you for me. I go to seek Pabhavati. His mother, on hearing what he had to say, replied, Well, my son, you must exercise great vigilance. Women, truly, are impure-minded creatures, and she filled a golden bowl with all manner of elegant food, and saying, This is for you to eat on the journey, she took leave of him. Taking the bowl and having thrice respectfully saluted his mother, he cried, If I live, I will see you again, and so went to the royal chamber. Then he put on himself with the 5 sorts of weapons, and putting 1,000 pieces of money in a bag, he took his bowl of food and a coconada lute, and leaving the city set out on his journey. Being very strong and vigorous, by noontime he had travelled 50 leagues, and after eating his food, in the remaining half-day he made up another 50 leagues, and so in the course of a single day he accomplished a journey of 100 leagues. In the evening he bathed and then entered the city of Sagala. No sooner did he set foot in the place than Pabhavati, by the power of his virtue, could no longer rest quietly on her couch, but got out of bed and lay upon the ground. The bodhisattva was thoroughly exhausted with his journey and being seen by a certain woman. As he was wandering about the street, was invited by her to rest in her house, and after first bathing his feet she offered him a bed. While he was asleep, she prepared him some food and then waking him up gave it him to eat. He was so pleased with her that he presented her with the 1,000 pieces of money and the golden bowl, leaving there his 5 sorts of weapons. He said, "There is some place I must go to," and taking his lute he went to an elephant stall and cried to the elephant keepers, "Let me stay here and I will make music for you." They allowed him to do so and he went apart and lay down. When his fatigue had passed off, he rose up and unstrapping his lute he played and sang, thinking that all who lived in the city should hear the sound of it. Pabhavati, as she lay on the ground, heard it and thought, "This sound can come from no lute but his," and felt sure that King Kusa had come on her account. The king of Madda too on hearing it thought, "He plays very sweetly. Tomorrow I will send for him and make him my musician." The bodhisattva thinking, "It is impossible for me to get sight of Pabhavati, if I stay here. This is the wrong place for me," swiftly moved on quite early and after taking his morning meal in an eating house, he left his lute and went to the king's potter and became his apprentice. One day after he had filled the house with potter's clay, he asked if he should make some vessels and when the potter answered, "Yes, do so," he placed a lump of clay on the wheel and turned it. When once it was turned, it went on swiftly till midday. After molding all manner of vessels, great and small, he began making one specially for Pabhavati with various figures on it. Truly the purposes of Buddhas succeed. He resolved that only Pabhavati was to see these figures. When he had dried and baked his vessels, the house was full of them. The potter went to the palace with various specimens. The king on seeing them asked who had made them. "I did, sire." "I am sure you did not make them." "Who did?" "My apprentice, sire." "Not your apprentice, your master rather. Learn your trade from him. From now on let him make vessels for my daughters." And he gave him 1,000 pieces of money, saying, "Give him this, and present all these small vessels to my daughters." He took the vessels to them and said, "These are made for your amusement." They all were present to receive them. Then the potter gave Pabhavati the vessel which the great being had made specially for her. Taking it she at once recognized her own likeness and that of the humpbacked nurse and knew it could be the handiwork of no one but King Kusa, and being angry she said, "I do not want it. Give it to those that wish for it." Then her sisters perceiving that she was in a rage laughed and said, "You suppose it is the work of King Kusa. It was the potter, not he, that made it. Take it." She did not tell them that he had come there and had made it. The potter gave the 1,000 pieces of money to the bodhisattva and said, "My son, the king is pleased with you. From now on you are to make vessels for his daughters and I am to take them to them." He thought, "Although I go on living here, it is impossible for me to see Pabhavati." And he gave back the money to him and went to a basket maker who served the king. And becoming his apprentice, he made a palm leaf fan for Pabhavati. And on it he depicted a white umbrella and taking as his subject a banquet hall, amongst a variety of other forms he represented a standing figure of Pabhavati. The basket maker took this and other ware, the workmanship of Kusa, to the palace. The king on seeing them asked who had made them and just as before presented 1,000 pieces of money to the man, saying, "Give these specimens of wicker work to my daughters." And he gave the fan that was specially made for her to pabhavati. And in this case also no one recognized the figures. But Pabhavati on seeing them knew it was the king's handiwork and said, "Let those that wish for it take it," and being in a rage she threw it on the ground. So the others all laughed at her. The basket maker brought the money and gave it to the bodhisattva. Thinking this was no place for him to stay in, he returned the money to the basket maker and went to the king's gardener and became his apprentice. And while making all sorts of garlands he made a special wreath for Pabhavati, plucked out with various figures. The gardener took them to the palace. When the king saw them, he asked who had fashioned these garlands. "I did, sire." "I am sure you did not make them." "Who did?" "My apprentice, sire." "He is not your apprentice, rather is he your master. Learn your trade from him. From now on he is to weave garlands of flowers for my daughters, and give him this 1,000 pieces of money." And giving him the money he said, "Take these flowers to my daughters." And the gardener offered to Pabhavati the wreath that the bodhisattva had made specially for her. Here too, on seeing amongst the various figures a likeness of herself and the king, she recognized Kusa's handiwork and in her rage threw the wreath on the ground. All her sisters, just as before, laughed at her. The gardener too took the 1,000 pieces of money and gave them to the bodhisattva, telling him what had happened. He thought, "Neither is this the place for me," and returning the money to the gardener he went and engaged himself as an apprentice to the king's cook. Now one day the cook, in taking various kinds of food to the king, gave the bodhisattva a bone of meat to cook for himself. He prepared it in such a way that the smell of it pervaded the whole city. The king smelt it and asked if he were cooking some more meat in the kitchen. "No, sire, but I did give my apprentice a bone of meat to cook." "It must be this that you smell." The king had it brought to him and placed a morsel on the tip of his tongue, and it woke up and thrilled the 7,000 nerves of taste. The king was so enslaved by his appetite for choice foods that he gave him 1,000 pieces of money and said, "From now on you are to have food for me and my daughters cooked by your apprentice, and to bring mine to me yourself, but your apprentice is to bring theirs to my daughters." The cook went and told him. On hearing it he thought, "Now is my desire fulfilled. Now shall I be able to see Pabhavati." Being pleased, he returned the 1,000 pieces of money to the cook, and next day he prepared and sent dishes of food to the king and himself climbed up to the palace where lived Pabhavati, taking the food for the king's daughters on a carrying pole. Pabhavati saw him climbing up with his load and thought, "He is doing the work of slaves and hired persons, work quite unsuitable for him. But if I hold my peace, he will think I approve of him, and going nowhere else he will remain here, gazing at me. I will straightway abuse and insult him and drive him away, not allowing him to remain a moment here." So she left the door half open and, holding one hand on the panel with the other, pressed up the bolt, and she repeated the second stanza. "Kusa, for you by day and night. To bear this burden is not right. Haste back, please, to Kusavati. Your ugly form I'm unwilling to see." He thought, "I have got speech of Pabhavati," and pleased at heart he repeated 3 stanzas. "Bound by your beauty's spell, Pabhavati, my native land has little charm for me. Madda's fair realm is ever my delight. My crown removed, to live in your dear sight. O soft-eyed girl, fair Pabhavati, what is this madness that overcomes me? Knowing full well the land that gave me birth, I wander half mad over all the earth. Clad in bright-colored bark and surrounded with golden zone. Your love, fair maid, I crave, and not an earthly throne." When he had thus spoken, she thought, "I insult him, hoping to stir up a feeling of resentment in him, but he as it were tries to appease me by his words. Supposing he were to say, "I am King Kusa," and take me by the hand, who is there to prevent it? And somebody might hear what we had to say. So she closed the door and bolted it inside. And he took up his carrying pole and brought the other princesses their food. Pabhavati sent her humpbacked slave to bring her the food that King Kusa had cooked. She brought it and said, "Now eat." Pabhavati said, "I will not eat what he has cooked. Do you eat it and go and get your own supply of food and cook it and bring it here. But do not tell anyone that King Kusa has come." The humpback from now on brought and ate the portion of the princess and gave her own portion to Pabhavati. King Kusa from that time being unable to see her thought, "I wonder whether Pabhavati has any affection for me or not. I will put her to the test." So after he had supplied the princesses with their food, he took his load of food and going out struck the floor with his feet by the door of Pabhavati's chamber and clashing the dishes together and groaning aloud, he fell all of a heap and swooned away. At the sound of his groans she opened her door and seeing him crushed beneath the load he was carrying she thought, "Here is a king, the chief ruler in all India, and for my sake he suffers pain night and day, and now, being so delicately raised, he has fallen under the burden of the food he carries. I wonder if he is still alive." And stepping from her chamber she stretched on her neck and looked at his mouth, to watch his breathing. He filled his mouth with spit and let it drop on her person. She retired into her chamber, insulting him, and standing with the door half open she repeated this stanza. Ill luck is his that ever craves, to find his wishes rejected. As you, O king, do fondly attract with love still unreturned. But because he was madly in love with her, however much he was abused and insulted by her, he showed no resentment but repeated this stanza. Whosoever shall gain what he holds dear, may loved or unloved be. Success alone is what we praise, to lose is misery.